The Apostle Paul is associated with more than half of the New Testament, including 13 letters and epistles. Within this corpus, three are collectively known as the Pastoral letters: 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. They have been called pastoral since the early 1700s because the central concern in each is the care of evangelized communities after the founding missionaries had moved on, either geographically or through death. The pastoral letters are within a larger group of Pauline letters whose authorship is dubious. Today, most New Testament scholars appear to believe the pastoral letters were not authored by Paul or likely any of his immediate disciples. This question of authority is relevant for considering how much force the instructions of a Pauline disciple several times removed has compared to those of the historical Paul. Raymond Brown says, this is a question of one's acceptance of inspiration and biblical authority. Quote, if the Spirit has given all the writings to Christ's church, then as Scripture, the pastorals have no less divine guarantee than the undisputed Pauline letters. Joanna Dewey claims the pastoral letters are pseudonymous and represent only one voice in the early 2nd century in the debate over Paul's memory. Comparing to other Pauline books, which paint him as a cultural hero, she says, quote, the pastorals present Paul as an authority on church administration. They represent perhaps the most total capitulation of Christianity to the patriarchal social structure of the Roman Empire to be found in the New Testament. End quote. This final statement seems to support pseudonymous writing for at least two reasons. First, the genuine letters appear to have more nuance or context to the spirit intended behind expressions of male dominance, female submission. Second, Paul names particular women, such as Phoebe, as important disciples.
If what Brown says about the divine guarantee is true, then the patriarchy being further institutionalized in the pastorals is legitimated, and this would be in contrast to what has already been said regarding nuance. As Matthew Skinner has stated, Paul was a pastor first and foremost, addressing the particular issues faced by the people of the churches that he tended and loved. This is obviously true even in cursory readings of the texts. All the genuine letters were addressed to communities, including Philemon and the church of his household, and each address concerns specific to the community. In contrast, the pastoral letters were addressed to individuals and contain criteria for the character of the bishops who will succeed them, including being married only to one woman, instructions for bishops and deacons, instructions for the order of public worship, instructions on faithful preaching of the gospel, and each of these three letters concerns itself with false versus true teachings. Regarding questions of authority, Brown puts forward two questions for one's consideration. The first, are the instructions of the pastorals about church structure and order a legitimate continuation of the Pauline tradition? This is a legitimate question whether one regards the pastorals as genuine, Deutero or Pauline, or inspired by the scriptures and written by someone else. We know from passages in Romans, 1 Corinthians, and others that Paul was not opposed to authoritative structures. Sociologically, it was necessary for authoritative structures to be implemented in order for the church to survive. Brown's second question. If one regards the developing structure in the pastorals as loyal to strains in Paul, or authoritative, normative, irreversible, does that mean it is irreformable? Remember, the structure developed in a particular society with particular circumstances, male-dominated, and with an acute danger of false teaching. Do injunctions against women teaching men remain permanent guidelines for the male-dominated church? Or are they products of a time when women did not get the same education as men? Holding fast to the structures of the pastorals requires obedience to its officials, and then denies the gifts of those called by the same Spirit who do not fit within that system.
To know for certain who authored the pastorals. We are left to consider with one another how authoritative they are for us today, while being careful not to impose our presentism on the texts. The questions posed by Brown and others continue to be relevant to Christian traditions in many ways, including the places of women within the hierarchy and how strictly to follow a particular theologian or other leader.